This form is a loft from a circle to a squircle, similar to the knob from Project 2. So I'd consider lofting it as a quarter from left to right. I think one of the things to consider in SOLIDWORKS is the orientation. So here I think it makes sense to build it with the round face on the top plane and orient it into this standing position at the end for the rendering. It'll just help keep the planes in line. I also recommend having your image open and off to the side. None of the dimensions that I have are accurate. I'm just judging by eye. Obviously, for you, I hope that you can either you need to judge by eye or try and find orthographics of the image to help you with the traces. So here's that quarter sketch that I made. Just a comment on the master. These are all mirrored about these lines. So this mirrors about this to give us this one, and so on and so forth. And this means that as we adjust one of them, they all adjust equally. So I copied over two of them, made a sketch fillet through what corner and extruded that up. And then this is a copy of the circle. And actually I'm realizing now it really should be more of, it should just be a quarter. Again, thinking back to that knob sketch demo, or that knob demo from Project 2. Now here's the profile that I want to loft. Something that I'll do sometimes if I want to copy this to be a quarter is actually I'll put in a revolve feature about here, and I'll just revolve it 90 degrees. I can click this to flip it the other way. I don't want it to merge with anything, but now we have two equal identical faces. If I need to adjust it down the road, it's just one sketch to edit. It's not two different ones. So this is slightly different from that demo. And actually I'm realizing this maybe negates the need for this sketch. But what I would do is I would loft, I think this should work, this face to this face. For curvature I'm going to select this. And then again a reminder, if you need to select disjointed edges, you want to right click first and say Selection Manager. All of these should be in a row. Make sure you're not accidentally clicking on a different edge when you start it. And now let's see if this works. Can I say not tangency to face, normal to profile is what we want. And that's again so that when we mirror it we don't have any seams. Seam looks like it's working to me so far. We want to make sure that we don't merge anything here. And this was totally unintentional, but I'm realizing now that actually this hollow makes sense. If we look at the image again, it's that hollow is needed in there. And then finally we would just mirror the bodies, merge the solids, and mirror this again. And now we should have something similar. Of course, missing the details. The kind of wafer on this back side can be approached in multiple ways, but again, so because we built it this way, from this plane, probably the simplest thing to do. And so I'm just like glancing over at the image. I would maybe take a spline and then just pulling on sort of these arc controls. This is maybe where it's helpful. The only hard thing with building it at a weird orientation or an orientation different than the render is figuring out where your ground plane is. So it might be helpful at this point to have this in here. If this, I'm having second thoughts on the spline, maybe it's just a straight line that can be parallel with a bit of a bend at the bottom. Tangent to this. This can represent the ground plane. And then what I would do is just with a single line we can load an extrude command. And you'll notice down here there's an automatic checkbox for a thin feature. And yeah, maybe this should be done before you mirror this other half. But yeah, the direction can be blind. We can not merge it. And then creating a sketch on, in this orientation, the top plane. You know, these edges can be copied. So I can select those edges, convert entities. And let's see, maybe the main difference is this one, it needs to come lower. So maybe I would, let's see, I'd probably put a trim in here maybe. And this is perhaps where it would make sense to have, set this before construction. It might make sense to have a spline in here to complete this shape. So we can tell this to be tangent. We can tell this to be tangent. Now I'm realizing that this thin command, here, let's finish this and see what it looks like. Oops, we got to go through all both if you're cutting with just a single line. Yeah, the weird thing with this is it's going to leave like this edge. So one way around that, instead of this being an extrude thin, I'm going to delete this, unfortunately it gets rid of our sketch, is we can actually do this as a surface. So we can extrude this surface the same way we did the thing before. Top plane, same exact process, copying this edge over. I don't know, maybe we only want the top one, and maybe here again is where I would have a line coming off this bottom edge, complete this with a spline, tangent, and tangent. There we go. And now we're going to do a surface trim. So these are all like new tools. I loaded that while I was still in the sketch, so it's using the sketch as a trim. And here you can see I can select parts of the surface to cut away. Remove selections. Sometimes it might default to keep selections. Just make sure you know what setting you have, and then check that box. And now if we have this surface and we use a command called thicken, now this edge running along the side will be consistent. We won't have a weird cut in it. And again, this is all just judging by eye. You can flip the direction it goes. We don't want to merge result. But this is, now we have a cleaner edge. So maybe that's the way I would recommend to do this. Obviously, we'd want to cut away at this in here. So yeah, this is relatively straightforward, but this would be done with a series of sweeps through the middle here, or sweep cuts perhaps. So again, having this open off to the right, here we can see how I have my master recommended setup. Again, this is just judging by eye, so don't take any of these measurements to heart. Now I did count the number of cuts in here, and I believe it was 7, was it? Or it was 7 ridges maybe in the middle. This is what I'm referring to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these like peaks, not counting the outer ones. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these sort of valleys. So I think these represent the peaks. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if we mirror these 3 over. So that means, I'm trying to think, I feel like, now that I think about it, the cut would make more sense to sweep than the peak. I remember now. Actually, it doesn't need to be a sweep. This can be an extrude cut straight all the way until it starts to radius here, and then this can be a revolve. So I'm just going to run with what I have. I'm just going to remember that the markers I have are the peaks, not the valleys. And let's just explore. So firstly, I'm going to create a new sketch on the top plane, select this outside edge, or rectangle, convert entities, extrude. I'm just going to extrude this down, looking off to the side at the picture. So again, these are the peaks, not the valleys. So I'm going to create a sketch on this face. I can do that because it's flat. So I select it and then Alt and S, Alt plus N to make it normal to me. So here's what I was saying, where these are the peaks. So I am going to make sure that that's coincident and this is coincident. So carefully select this endpoint and then this endpoint. I'm going to try and set this up, let's see, in a way that it's symmetric. So set that to be vertical. I just want these guidelines to be for construction. Now, if I recall, this measurement for me was 0.4. Again, figure out these own measurements on your own. You can use this by, of course, but again, I'm just judging by eye. This may not look right when it comes out. So I'm matching that number that was here, and I'm just going to pattern this like so. Now, we can treat this in a number of ways. This could also be, really, this probably should have been extruded in half. This first, let's call it a chocolate bar. This could be like another master sketch in here, but I'm just going to close off this shape, extrude cut. In this case, I'm going to say up to vertex and go up to here. Don't know why it's not displaying for us. Okay. Interesting. So I believe this means that it's an open sketch here, maybe? That's odd to me. Maybe because we patterned this. It seems to be working now. Let's try, is this the issue? Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why it gave us that error. If for whatever reason you're ever trying to do a cut and it doesn't work, load the selected contours and just click in where you want. And this typically will solve most cut problems. If you're like trying to cut and you don't see this preview, that's the solution. So here's what I was saying before. So now we have this cut. Like I said, this chocolate bar probably should have been half. So this is sort of my quick workaround now. I'm just going to select this front plane and cut with surface, make sure the arrow is pointing away. Again, this is kind of like the, what's it called, the quick fix, the dirty fix. Now this does happen to be on the right plane here, just how I have this set up, but we can actually select any of these faces. And I mean, really best practice here would be to select the right plane and create a sketch on it. Again, it just, yeah. I'm proposing that this curved cut happen in the middle here. And then I'm going to copy over this sketch that we used to make these ridges. So I'm going to select it and say convert entities. And now in features, I'm going to do a revolved cut. And I want a revolve cut around this center point. Now obviously we don't want it to go all the way around. We only want it to go really only 90 degrees actually. And then if it's going the wrong way, you just click this to flip it. And now if we take the front plane and mirror, we can mirror that body. And we have something close to what's necessary. The rest should be relatively straightforward. Yeah, if for some reason, your valley doesn't end up directly in the middle on a plane, this is what I was kind of like hesitating on before. This sketch can always be created on one of these triangular faces in here. So instead of the right plane, because again, proportionally, like I don't know if this is exactly in the middle, right? This may need to be shorter. You can always select one of these faces if you want. But best practice, if you are on a plane, it'd be good to use that. If you need to adjust this is also like a new command, but sort of a quick workaround. It's this move face command. You can select this here and just put in a value, flip the direction, right? So if you need to adjust this proportionally, you can do that. So this one's relatively straightforward. There's going to be like a lot of like extruding and extrude cutting and repeating on that level. If you can find an orthographic, this would be incredibly helpful because there's a lot of details in here that need to be addressed. But I think what I'm going to show is just roughly how I would construct this window. So for the master, again, if you have this is just judging by eye, but if you have an orthographic to reference, that would be helpful for that front view and then this side view. This is just mocking in the buttons. But what I did is I copied this outside rectangle, extruded that. I'm going to create a new sketch on the front plane. So select the front plane and Alt-S, Alt-N. Alt-S to create the sketch, Alt-N to rotate it so it's normal to us. And I'm going to try and copy both of these. And I'm going to try a new command. I think it's come up before, but hasn't been expressly talked about. It's called split. And I don't know, it may not like this 90-degree angle in here, but I'm going to try it. So I load this split command, and then I just click on the two different bodies I want. I mean, I really want all three, but this one will be created by just selecting these two. And I can check this box. And now here you can see we have three bodies. The split command is a weird one in that it does not consume the sketch. I don't know why that is, to be honest. But now we want there to be a window on this front face here. So one thing that I would do is I would right-click on this body and select Isolate. That hides the other two. It's a quick way to do that. And I would just shell on one of these faces that's going to be hidden. So again, the shell command, it just makes it hollow to an existing thickness. Now that that's done, I can exit Isolate. And now it looks complete again, but this body is hollow. What we can do is on this front plane, create a new sketch. So Alt-S, Alt-N, normal to. Alt-V turns on the sketches. I'm going to select the window that pre-set up. Convert entities. And now actually, again, there's different things we could do here. We could extrude cut and then extrude to recreate the window. Or we can use that command I just showed you again, the split command. Now the split command, I think it loaded with the sketch here. You want to click in this box. I didn't think I have to do that last time. And now I can click on this face in here, and you'll see with this box checked, it'll split it out. And so now I can check this box. And now it's just a matter of putting fillets on here. Right, so like 0.04. Again, when in doubt, like a millimeter seems about right. I mean, it might have made sense to, before we do this split, to put some like small fillets in the corner. So I can always come back and edit this sketch, I believe. And again, maybe like 0.02, a really small corner fillet. Maybe that's too small. So I can select all of these. Let's change this to 0.04. And check this. There we go. Now there's a small fillet in here. And now when we render this, if we change this to change the transparency, it's like a window we can see in. Now, of course, the parts that engage with the tape would have to be built. They could be revolved. Creating a new plane and revolving would be the way that I would do that. But yeah, a lot of these buttons would be like an extrude cut to make a pocket. Maybe I'll just show one of them. So now on this face here, this is my mock button setup. So because this is a flat face, I can sketch on it. So I'm going to select the face and Alt-S, Alt-N. I can right-click on this, and say select chain, convert entities. Now I'm going to say extrude cut. Again, the amounts and values is up to you to judge by eye. I'm just kind of doing this more for demonstration. Now I can select this back face here, Alt-S, Alt-N, and then Alt-V to turn on the sketches again. Select chain, convert entities, and now extrude. And this is where we want to make sure, firstly, that the button goes above the surface. And now we don't want to merge result with this button. And now it kind of exists in this pocket, sort of similar to our setup. So it's going to be like that process over and over again. Just when you do this one, make sure that you have a bit of a gap here so that the shadow is cast. This surface with the horizontal lines extends beyond what we can see. And there's a bit of a space there. I believe that's how these sliders work. They probably have like a piece of plastic that go off to the side. These can all be extruded for the most part. Texture can be done in Keyshot or in SolidWorks. The complex aspect of this product is the spout, and this will have to get into surfacing because of its organic nature. So again, if you have an orthographic, it helps to set it as a background image to trace. This is just judging by eye. A couple things about this. Where the spout ends, I would connect this with a straight line and create this line to be perpendicular because we want a plane on here. just to give us a curve or an arc to our spout. And then this line here, this represents, it looks to me like the tea kettle has just a bit of an arc to the body. So here's what I mean. Well, so firstly, yeah, I created a plane on here. And actually what I did is I connected this point and this point with a half circle sketch. I can show that in a minute. And then same thing here, I connected this, I created a new plane here. So the way to create a plane is insert reference geometry plane. And when the dialog pops up, I select this line and this point. And again, that's my preferred method of creating a plane. Now, getting into surfacing, what I did here is I created a new sketch on this front, or sorry, on the right plane. And I copied this spline. And then I went to extruded the surface tab and extruded surface. And so a surface is similar to a solid body, except it's just a thin sheet of paper is the way to think about it. If a solid body is a piece of clay, the surface is just one of those faces. Now the reason I created this extrusion is so that we have something tangent, so that when we mirror this, again we're building it in halves, when we mirror it, the spout shouldn't have a seam. It should be nice and smooth. So I did that for the top and the bottom. So I'm actually going to delete this loft here. Firstly, to show you that I created, these are the circles that I'm talking about, half circles rather. So when I created this plane on this face, it's a half circle connecting this point and this point. And then the same thing here, half circle. And so the center of the circle is on the center of this line. The center of this circle is on this line. You can see it right there. So what I did is, again, in the surface tab, I loaded loft. So the loft works very similar to a solid body. I just hit Alt and V to turn off all the sketches. So the profiles, I'm in fact selecting these two edges. And then now for the guide curves, I'm going to turn the sketches back on, and this is where I want these circles. Now surfacing allows for more controlled modeling because you're modeling one face at a time as opposed to 4 faces or 3 faces of a solid object or like a closed shape, so to speak. So in this case, we're just working line to line. So this is where it's useful for doing more organic options. Now, here again, like I mentioned, the start and end constraints, we want it to be tangency to face. That's why we created this surface, and tangency to face. It could be done with just the sketch and normal to profile. I found that this method is just a little bit, leads to slightly better results. It's a bit more controlled, albeit it's like 2 extra steps here. Now, the thing with surfacing is it has to go from a surface to a solid body. So firstly, what I'm going to do is, these were just for construction, so I'm going to right click on them and hide them. We don't need these surfaces anymore. I think the rest of the teapot is understandable, right? This kind of revolve of half of it. But what we need to do is we need to close off this surface. So what we're going to do is in this right plane, we're going to go back to the regular features and say mirror. And here's where we want to mirror bodies. I don't like that they have bodies here because you can also mirror surfaces in that selection. I guess in this case it counts a surface as a body. Now there's a couple things we can do to turn this into a solid, and actually because this is an open spout, perhaps the best thing to do would be to thicken this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the surface command. There's a command called knit, which is basically it's like combining surfaces together. So we load that and we select the 2 surfaces we want to combine, in this case left and right. Check the box, so now this is one surface. If I drag the blue bar before that, you'll notice this blue line in between them. The blue line indicates a surface edge. When I drag this down, the blue line in the center turns to black. It's now connected. And so now what we're going to try and do is a thicken tool and see if this works. So I'm going to load, again, I'm still in the surfaces tab. I'm going to click on thicken, click on this, and here you can already see the offset of where it would be. This can be kind of a finicky tool. It doesn't always work well Jenga tower wise, like it can lead to failure. And we can merge result, that's fine. It's going to merge with this body anyway. And there we go. Yeah, see, sometimes it leads to, like, can you see how this edge is behaving kind of odd? That's because of the thicken command. Now the way you solve that is you can make this spout longer than it needs to be, and then in this right plane, throw a cut on here. So I'm just cutting with a thin line through all both. If the thin line is confusing, you can make it a closed shape. And now we have a cleaner edge on that spout. So this one is actually quite complex, more than it looks. The white parts are revolves. It's the orange ones that, of course, are a challenge. The way that I propose you approach the orange string is basically a surface loft. So we're going to create a body that represents the path. I think maybe it's more clear to just show it in SolidWorks. So again, orthographic view of the object would help. Here are the main parts that are going to be revolved. Relatively simple, I might argue, in the way that it's set up. Some things to note, however, is marking where the orange string is going to intersect this circle or this sphere as this horizontal line perpendicular to this is going to be helpful. I think that's the only thing. The reason these are offset is to create cuts, to put a bit of a gap, similar to like this gap here if needed. So I think that's all pretty straightforward. What I'm talking about here, these sketches, these will represent where the strings will go. So here you can see it's just simply connecting the center part. Again, this line represents where the holes will be, as does this line, as does this one here on this cone. What I mean by that is it represents where these circles will end up from a side view, these holes. And I'm connecting those dots with straight lines. The only one that's not straight is this one, because the rope would bend along this sphere. So that's like a secondary master sketch to help set that up. Now this first part I think is pretty straightforward. We revolve the basic geometries. This split line, again, this represents where the hole will be. So to create this command, it's like a new sketch. So Alt-S, Alt-N, selecting this line, convert entities. So now we have this line. And then in the surface tool, we want to go to curves, split line, and select this face. And what that does is it puts this black line on here. We're going to need this edge for our surface loft. So that's how I created this. So now here's the surface loft, and let's look at it. So this sketch here, this is off of, it's off of this master. Here's this line. This is simply an offset of 0.1 from this line to here. This is a line that's along this edge. This one is also along that split edge, or it's really also along, if I turn this master back on. And normal to, oh, okay, it's not along that. Oh, this is a perpendicular to this. I would argue actually, so I have this wrong. This should be along this line, collinear. Not that it matters. That's picking hairs apart. But anyway, this offset is then connected by these tangent arcs. These are just tangent to here, simple arc, no spline or anything. This sketch is created the exact same way. So here it's, again, it's using this master, it's copying these two sketches and then an offset of 0.1. These lines are in phase with where the circles will be, and then a slight arc between those. Now, what we're doing is we're lofting as a surface. So a surface loft is, a surface is just basically a flat sheet of paper as opposed to a three-dimensional shape or object, and we're lofting a line to a line. So here in this case we have this line to this, or that's the two sketches I just showed you being lofted to each other, loaded here. The settings are very similar if not identical, to the solid body loft. It's just, again, it's lines as opposed to shapes. Here in the guide curves, this is what I mentioned. We're selecting these orbits to guide these around. The final setting I have is normal to profile. And then making sure that the normal to profile is pointing in the right direction. You want to look for these arrows and make sure they're both pointing out. And that creates our surface loft, which I can turn on here. So what this does, this is going to represent sort of like a three-dimensional plane that the strings will follow. So the next command we're going to use the split command again. And here, let me just show you this sketch before we put it in there. This will represent where the strings are. And so this is where you're going to have to do some studying of the object and figure out how to set these up in the best orientation or where it makes sense. Here I'm just representing it with a V. And once we have that, we're going to use the split command. If you ever get an error on the split command, just simplify your sketch. You know, you can always do it one at a time. We can always add more here. The kind of confusing thing is you can see like this sketch, because it's coming from the side, is doing something kind of weird. So you may have to like do another sketch from this vantage point. I definitely recommend you do this in halves, so you don't have to do this twice. But you may need to create like a series of planes to get this split to happen properly. Again, I don't know if I'm explaining it in good enough words, but like this line here, you can see it kind of has this J hook to it. Whereas because it's just the nature of geometry, it's because we're cutting from this view, you may need to cut from like this view or even maybe this view. Now, once we have this set, I recommend using this tool, right click and isolate. And you can look just at the surface here. Now, I created a new plane, and the way that I did that is I went to Insert, Reference Geometry Plane. I selected one of these edges here. This is whatever you want to sweep along. So I select that edge, and then I select an endpoint, a starting point here, and then check that box. And you may have to do that for each of these strings going all the way around. But I'm going to delete that out because I already have that in here as plane 1. Now what I did is on this plane I sketched a circle on this point, as shown here. And then what I did is after I sketched that circle, I created a sweep. Here's the circle, the train, and the track is this edge. And now I can exit isolate. I can right click on this and hide it, and we can see what that starts to look like. And it's basically repeating that step process a couple times over again. You're going to have to do another surface loft for this portion. It may be also helpful, just like we split line to get these guidance. I'm going to create a new front plane sketch. You're probably going to want to split line this one too. On here. And then same thing, you're going to want to loft, again, an edge with a slight curve, you know, the corner's curved on it to go from this portion to this portion. The reason the curves are there is to represent this sort of turn into this hole. Now to make this real, you can see this ends, I believe if you can select this face and go to Features and say Move Face, you can push this deeper into the body as needed to make it look more realistic. Again, here's what I'm talking about with this angle looking like it may be slightly off. I mean, it may work, but each of these splits into the surface may need to be like perpendicular to the curvature. So let's see if I can explain that from a top view. You may need to create planes like this. So there's a plane on this face for that edge, a plane perpendicular to this point on this edge, so that each of these edges, as they split the surface, are happening sort of perpendicular to its curvature. The most complex thing about this piece is definitely the texture and the earpiece. So this can be done with a revolve. These textures looks pretty straightforward that this might be able to be done in Keyshot. But it could also be like extrude, like a pattern cut around. I'll show a way to do this. I mean, you can also think to back to the grip demo on the bottle, the advanced demo. This would be a sweep. The circle would be like a circle with all these little divots cut into them. But let me show this earpiece and this like fading texture, how that might be done. And I'm realizing this piece looks transparent, so we can talk about that. So the master sketch here, it's just simply the earpiece. So it's the outer piece, the center, and then this kind of like off-center oval that goes in the ear. So I'm just extruding these. Again, really best practice here would be to do it in halves, but for this project I can understand doing it in a whole like this. So the first loft is basically this circle to this face. If we look at the settings, it's like normal to and tangency to face. So here the tangency to face is this. I think this could also be normal to profile. Yeah, and it's the same basically. This next loft is sort of the same thing, circle to center circle. This could actually probably be a revolve, I'm realizing, down here. All right, now the texture. There's a couple ways to do that, but I think this is the best way that I've determined is we want to extrude this. Now we are going to get into some surfacing here. In surfaces, the surface command, we can do something called an offset surface. And what that does is we select a face and you can see that it kind of pushes it out. And here we can set in the depth of the texture. Again, you don't need to use my numbers. I'm judging by eye. I'm doing this kind of just like rough and quick. But basically, you know, you can judge for yourself where you think this texture needs to be, the depth it needs to be cut to. So here's my offset surface. Then what I did is I just patterned this extrusion all the way around. And then we're going to do another command, a new command called cut with surface. I think that's it. I'm realizing this says surface cut, but we're going to load this. And we're going to select this offset that we made. We want to make sure the arrow is pointing outwards. So I'm going to just click on this to flip it out. Here for the feature scope, I think we could leave it at auto select. That should work. Let's just try that. It makes our life easier. And now if we hide this surface, you can see that these bumps are all set to the right amount. Now I would repeat this to match the image. It looks like the surface texture gets more shallow to me. So you know, you might need to do another extrude. If you need to create like a new, let's see, this was just on the front plane. Now, and so this command did the same thing. Now there is another command called wrap. It's a little bit more fussy. It doesn't always work, but I can show it here. So here we have, you know, the bumps on this face. You know, let's just load it again. So here's a sketch on the front plane of 3 circles. I'm going to load the wrap command. And so here, bump out, bump in, or split line, circle or wavy face. For some reason, the cylindrical option didn't work, so the wavy face is selected. And here it's asking what face to bump out on. So I'm selecting this. We can see that it's loading here. And again, right now it's a bump out of 0.01. If I check this box, that's what it gives us. Now wrap is more so used sometimes when there's like a logo or something, especially to put something on like this kind of organic face. So if I select this and I pattern it, and maybe the spacing is too far, so let's go 0.04, not far enough, 0.06, and check this box. When I exit here, you can see that it'll wrap this pattern, but what's happening is like it's getting wrapped up like kind of like a rainbow here. And that's because you need to think of this like a sticker. You know, if this sticker were placed on this face, it would curve up and away from us, and that's why that's happening. I believe it would work better if this option worked, but for some reason it's giving an error. And I'll be honest, I don't know why it's doing that. So you can try playing with that command. Honestly though, I think this offset cut is going to work better for you, the first thing I showed. So this is a relatively straightforward overall shape as far as being a revolve. The complexity, of course, comes from the texture. And yeah, we can definitely touch on some surfacing on how to accomplish this. So here's the first object I think that I've brought the image in to look at. This works better with cylindrical objects because you can trace the center to get what you want and kind of ignore the edges. Again, thinking back to the bottle sketch, or the bottle project rather. So I'm going to edit this front sketch. Here you can see this like back edge, just checking that I'm getting it. This left edge, I'm losing it a bit. Yeah, reminder to bring this background picture in its sketch picture, and you can load the selection there. But yeah, so here we have it traced. Here this is marking this like bottom portion. So I can revolve the base. Now the next thing I might do is create a new sketch on the front plane. I'm going to copy this edge, or sorry, this feature, and I'm going to copy this center feature. So just hide everything. So those are the two sketches I'm working with. I'm going to set the middle one for construction. Now I'm going to go to the Surfaces tab and revolve surface on this edge. This will be our guide as to how far we want our feature to go. We can hide this for now. So I'm going to do the same thing, Alt-S, Alt-N to create a new sketch on the front plane, Alt-V to turn my sketches visible. And now I'm going to copy this exact same line here. And what I want to do is set it to before construction and offset this to whatever depth we roughly judge this to be. And I mean, I can kind of look in the sketch here. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but I can look at where the shadow ends so that, you know, just visually aligning by eye to what that is. Again, my numbers are not accurate by any means. Oops, didn't mean to exit out of that. I'm going to create a center line here again, set this to before construction, and once again revolve a surface around here. So here we have our two surfaces like that. Now, here we want to create another feature that will be the center. I'm just going to hide both the surfaces for now. I'm going to create a new sketch on the front plane. So front plane, Alt-S, Alt-N, and now I'm going to select this part of the sketch, convert entities on that, L for line, L for line again, and now I just want to hit F for fillet, or this command here. Now, I don't know if these are all equal. I'm assuming they might be. So I select all those lines, and you can see the little yellow pieces in the middle, and just kind of get this close to match. I'm realizing this up here is a bit off. But yeah, here we have our fillets. Check that box. Now we can go back to surfaces again and extrude the surface. So we're extruding a paper thin piece. And here we're going to try up to surface. And what we want to do is go up to the first surface we revolved, which represents the outside. Now if it's not letting us select it, I can click on Show Surface Body and I can click on this. I believe I was clicking on the wrong thing, and here I probably had to click the command. Let's try that. Yeah, clicking the command works. That way, even if it's not visible, but that's the way to do it. Now with surfaces, there's no worry about merging. They're never going to merge. You have to manually do that. So now we have this. Now we're going to use this inner surface here. Or sorry, this is the outer one. We can use this to trim, but now I'm actually realizing that we actually want another surface just slightly in, because if I study the image, it looks like the texture also goes inside a bit. So what I'm going to do, we could revolve another surface just like we did these ones, or we can use a command called offset surface, selecting this inner face, and just roughly judging, you know, this gap to be equal. Check that box. And now I can do a surface trim, or a trim surface. We want standard. The trim tool is this inner piece. And then here we want, you want to check whether you're keeping or removing. In this case, it's set to remove. So the part I'm going to select to remove is this inner portion like this here. And I'm going to click on that green check. Now the remaining thing to do is to turn these surfaces into solid bodies. So you see here I've been building kind of in halves up until this point, or at least this bottom revolve. I guess this could have been a full revolve, just given the nature that we're patterning. So here I'm going to use the thicken command. So here I might want to select this midpoint and set this to be whatever we judge the distance to be, 0.05. That way we have our distances equal on both sides. And sure, we can merge result with the bottom. I'm going to edit this command to just be 360 in this instance. So now we have our center ridge, and now we can use the exact same thicken command for this piece. So we're going to go to thicken, select this. This time we don't want to merge result, or I would recommend not merging. And here we want to fillet these edges, because I perceive, I think, in the source image that that's what's happening. And now it's just a matter of patterning. So we can go here to the circular pattern, Alt-V to turn our sketches on. So here it's going to like default to the features. We don't want that. We want bodies. We want to select this one. This is why we didn't merge it. And here for the direction, we want to select the center here. And then it's just a matter of putting in a bunch of these. This will probably slow your computer way down, depending on how many bodies you have in here. And it may be a matter of now just like playing with the depths and stuff. But essentially, yeah, that's the approach to this guy. This is can be built with extrudes. There's a lot of details here, though, with all these fins, and so it's just kind of an exercise in observation. I think I counted 10 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Also looking at where this is located, right? It's located above the 5th one, I believe, and below 3rd from the top. So setting up a side view and then maybe a front view in the master sketch. So that's what I have here. Here's the side view. I sketch one of these out and then selecting them, loaded this linear sketch pattern. We want it to go along vertically, so up the y-axis. So here's where I set this, I believe, to 10. And then this is just a matter of judging by eye. This distance. If you check the display instance count, I probably should have checked the dimension y spacing. But I think you can always add this in after the fact. So now if I change this to like 0.15, they all move down. And you can change this instance count as needed. So that's that view. This one here again, like I mentioned, you can see these lines are black, they're defined. That's because I set them to be coincident. I think I said 3rd from the top. So I selected, 1, 2, 3, coincident. And here, same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up. And so building it is simply like new sketch on the right plane, master sketch here. I'm going to convert entities on everything. I don't want this top one for now. But I do want to hit the trim tool and trim out all of these, so it's more of a clean, closed shape. And now we're going to try and do an extrude. And here's where, if you have a side master and a front master, I would do up to vertex and select one of these endpoints. Now, if I observe this, it looks like there's a different texture back here. So one thing that I would consider doing, whoops, it's not in the master here, but is sketching on this face, on any of these faces here, so Alt-S, Alt-N, and just sketching a rectangle and judging where this texture is going to go, and just doing a simple extrude cut. I don't think the depth matters, but here now we have this kind of pocket behind here. And I'm going to select this face, create a sketch on it. I'm just simply going to convert entities directly on the shape and extrude it back to where we were. So in this case, we can either it will just load the same dimension that was in here last time. But what I prefer is just say like up to surface and just select one of these back faces. And now here the key is to not merge result. So that when we go into key shot, you can simply apply a texture to this face. And if I look back to the image, it's kind of hard to see. I don't know. I can't tell if there's a part line back there. But anyway, that's how I'd recommend setting up for this dot texture. And then now here on the same face, or create a sketch on this face, I can copy over, select chain, copy over this rectangle. And here we can just simply say extrude. And again, I would say up to endpoint or up to vertex and select like this point here. Actually, no, sorry. I think it needs to go further. Let's look at this again. Oh yeah, it bumps out further. So in that case, we can just do blind, whatever that is. We don't want to merge result. The top part from a side view, we can select, you know, some of these features. Trim tool on these two. Now really there should probably be a bit of a small gap down here. So let's see, I'm going to delete both of these out. I'm going to set this both to be for construction. I'm going to put a small gap on this, like 0.01, maybe 0.02. And now these are what I'm going to connect. And again, it's all to like relate to this slight part line gap here. And then extrude, again, I would say up to surface for me and come up to here and not merge the result. And there we have most of the details. I think the last thing I want to show is just this little chord jack here. So I'm going to create a sketch on this face. I think I had it in the master. Oops, I have it on the wrong side apparently. Or maybe I'm building this backwards. No, I just have it on the wrong side. That's okay. It's okay for the demo. Obviously, for the project, we want to be as accurate as possible. So I'm going to extrude cut on this. So again, sketch on this face. We can do that because it's flat. Here's the circle. I don't think the depth matters that much. I guess we cut through everything, including this. That's fine. So I'm going to create a sketch on this back face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset entities. And something incredibly small, like 0.01 maybe. And now for the extrude, I want to do a thin feature. And again, these numbers, I don't know what scale. There's no scale I'm necessarily building to here. But anyway, I think what's key is having this slight gap between this edge and this edge. And then having this extrude just a little bit longer here. And that's how I build that jack. I would also make sure, I forgot to do this, I would make sure that merge result is unchecked. That way you can give it a different material. And that's just how these jacks look more realistic, is having this slight gap between this edge and this inner edge. You can judge for yourself what looks right. All right, we got a tricky one here. Yeah, there's 3 major challenges. One is the cut in of this graphic. The other is the threading. And the third is the grip down here. So one at a time. The graphic, I would try and find a 2D view of it, or do your best to lift it from this image. And what you want to do is try and trace it, or I guess there's different ways to go about it, but what I would probably do is try and recreate this in Illustrator by tracing it best you can. You can type in, you know, these words. Once you're in Illustrator, you can save out or export from Illustrator as a DWG file. So that's that's what this output looks like. Here we go, DWG file. And in SolidWorks, you can go to File, Open, and select the DWG file and click on Open. And when this property dialog pops up, you want to pay attention to these selections. So you want to import new part as 2D sketch, and you want to uncheck this box as reference. So just these two. If you click next, there's more settings, but I typically don't fuss with this. I just click on finish. Yeah, I was asking about exploding blocks. I don't know if it's trying to bring it in as a block, but a block is something new here that might be helpful. So it should bring in this sketch. You can always like then select everything and Control C. Obviously this is different. This is Paisley, but and then here on your like front view, right, or whatever plane you want, you can paste Control V, paste the sketch. The block is I would select everything. And this pop-up should happen when you select everything. You want to click on Make Block, and then check this green check here. And now it'll maintain its relationship because now it's a block. You can think of a block like a group. The other nice thing with the block is you can select this and you can actually set in the value of the size. So 0.5, we'll make it half scale. So that way you can get it to be about the size you want. And then probably what I would do to place in the image is I would use, so I'm still in the sketch, I would use this wrap command. So actually, sorry, we have to exit the sketch. So now selecting the sketch, I'd go to Features and click on Wrap. And because it's a cylinder, this option should work. And here we can put it as cut in, and we can select the face we want and set the depth and check the green check. So there must be an open contour in here, but this should work. Let's try the wobbly face. Yeah, I'm assuming that this is not perfect. It's probably a bit confused. So here, let's just for the sake of trying to make this illustration work, or this demonstration work, I'm going to create a new front plane sketch, and I'm going to select only a few of these if I can. Oh, typically select chain as an option here. It's not giving it to me. So first I'm just going to hide the body so I don't accidentally select it. Copy that over. Come on, select chain. Fortunately, it's not an option. So here, we'll just grab these two for the sake of time. And now let's see if the wrap command works with these. If not, it's a chance that there's a hole on there. So let's try it again. Wrap this face. There we go. Now let's select this one. Yeah, I think you want to select the cylinder since that's what you have. And there we go. It was confused before because there's like shapes within shapes. It wasn't sure what's positive and negative. That's why that's happening. And so wrap will be a bit more accurate than a cut. So that's how I would do that portion. But for now, I'm just going to suppress this. The next thing is threading. How do we do that? So here we cut in this hole, looking back to our source image here. It's not all the way deep. Now, the way that we create threading in SolidWorks, we're going to create a new sketch on this top face, and I'm just going to copy over this exact sketch I made. So here's a circle. So you want to start, your thread uses what's called a helix command, and a helix is built from a circle. It takes a circle and it turns it into a spring, is basically the way to think about that. So here we have our circle sketch. You want to go to the Surfaces tab, and you're looking for curves. If a solid body is like a piece of clay and a surface is like a piece of paper, a curve is like a piece of string. So here the option we want is helix and spiral. So I'm selecting the circle sketch. I select helix and spiral. And because I've already set this up, the settings are magically correct, but they probably won't be for you. So typically I think the default is pitch and revolution. In this case, we want height and revolution. So here I can set in the depth of the hole that was cut. So in this case, 0.4, but obviously match whatever yours is as you judge by eye. And then you can set the number of times you want it to go around in the distance of 0.4 to match, to your best judgment, the image that you're copying. Start angle, definitely set that to 0 degrees. That way it should definitely start on one of the major planes. And when you're happy with that, you can click check. You can reverse direction if it's popping up, you can pop it down, and then you can change it clockwise, counterclockwise to match whatever it is you want. So the helix, you can see here I've already created one. It is a curve. We can't see it right now. Oh, because it's being used in the sweep. So maybe it's helpful for me to continue on this path. It looks like a blue sketch basically. And here again, if it's kind of hard to tell where it starts and stops. If I select it, you can see in yellow, we can see where it ends. And here we can see the right plane intersects that. So basically we end up just using this as a train track for our sweep. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the right plane. Depending on what I do, if I'm just like making an illustration, sometimes my threading will just be a circle. But if you want slightly more accurate threading, often it looks something like this. Whoops. Something like this is often how threads are designed. Sometimes it's like this inverted, so it has, or mirrored rather, so it has that on both sides. But I mean, for this kind of render, something like this should probably be accurate enough. So that's our closed shape. We're going to exit out that sketch, and now we simply just go to our feature command and load the sweep. So here it's asking us what our train is. Here's the train. Now it wants the track. It's this. Sweeps it all the way around, and that's what we want. If for some reason you can't see your curves, you need to go to View, Hide Show, oops, and make sure Curves is pressed in. So there we have our threading. Okay, the next one is the grips, and that's a little bit more complicated. So I forgot to cover what I have at the start here. I have the start of, I started by creating this sketch. And this is this command here, polygon tool. So let me exit out and just start from scratch. So top plane sketch, select top plane, Alt S, and then click on the polygon tool. Here you can set the number of edges. Looking at this image here, I just roughly counted. It looks like it's a 12-sided shape, but don't take my word on that. Judge for yourself. So I simply here, I think I just typed in 12. And here inscribed or circumscribed, this means is the circle inside or outside. I think I did this selection. And now I can click here and drag. And there we go, we have our 12-sided shape. So I'm just going to suppress that so there's no confusion. So basically that's what I did here, and I extruded it to get us this shape. And then the reason why I did circle on the outside is I took this outside circle and then I extruded that, making sure not to merge them. So the next thing I did is I put a split line, or actually no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we want to plan this out, right? Here we're looking, I have this sketch turned to be visible. So we have 1, 2, 3 faces here, right? And each of these faces represents one of these curves. So we have 1, 2, 3. These 3 in the middle look like they're coming to an arc in the middle. Whereas these ones on the outside, it looks like they're going from an arc to the bottom to an arc on the top. So we want to count 1, 2, 3, 4 back. And we go from the 4th one to maybe one closer in. And that's basically what I did here. If I drag this down, I created 2 sketches here. Let's see. I think I went 1, 2, 3, 4. But basically I created, if I split this out, I apologize, this is probably confusing, but I have an arc from one straight to an arc to another straight, jumping a gap of one face. Now after I created those arcs, I created this sketch here. And what this sketch did is, if I turn these arcs back on, this sketch is a connection of this point on one arc to this point on the other arc, and then same here as just two straight lines. And then I loaded the split line command, so this is my sketch. It's these two lines connecting both endpoints of the arc. Then I went to surfaces, curves, and loaded the split line command, and that's what this is. And here it's the sketch, and then for the face, I selected the cylinder. And that was so that I now have two guide curves for my loft. So now here's where I loaded a surface loft. A surface loft, the settings are very similar. So again, it's in the surfaces command and loft. The settings are very similar to the solid body loft, except we're lofting single lines to single lines as opposed to closed shapes. So here again, my selections are the two arcs. And then for the guides, I selected both of these curves. No start and end constraints, and just check this box. And this is the result, is a loft that looks like that. Obviously, we can still play with the arcs. I think, just based on me having worked on this for a bit now, I think I have these far too deep. But again, judge, you can make your own judgment call there. Now, one thing I noticed is that this is just a start point, unfortunately, because what happens is if we go to our features here and do a circular pattern. So firstly, we need a middle here. So I'm going to load, we need a center line. I'm going to sketch a vertical line there. And now in our feature command, I'm going to load the circular pattern. We know we have 12 faces. So here it's confusing, but bodies can also be surfaces. So we can select this. The direction, this is why I created this line. We want to set the number to 12 because that's how many faces we have here. If we do this, you'll notice that we have this gap. So unfortunately, this is a bit clunky, but this is the best way that I can think to do this. I don't know, I guess a cleaner way would be to use the move body command and select this body, and under rotate about this here, and do whatever 360 divided by 12 is. Maybe this is a bit of a cleaner, less clunky way than doing that pattern. But yeah, basically I just want to illustrate that there's this gap here. And so actually what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new loft to account for this gap. So here we're going to click on the loft command. Let's see, I'm still trying to select these sketches. That seems to be working. And now for guide curves, I'm going to select this existing edge of the current loft, but for this back edge, I'm going to select this one. Right? And now hopefully this will account for the gap. So we're going to check that box. These initial lofts kind of become like sketches that we don't need anymore. And now when we pattern this, I'm going to change the source body from the original to this new one. And now here we go, the gap is gone. So now I'm going to suppress this out. This is for these kind of back arcs. So now I created a new master sketch. Again, observing this here, it looks to me like there is this sort of daisy chain of arcs down the middle. And that's what this is here. And now here's what I have. I have 1, 2, 3 faces to loft from this to this arc. But of course we have to create new arcs here. So again, it looks to me like there's an arc from here to this middle line, arc from here to here, here to here. Again, this is just kind of trying to point you in the right direction. There may be some ironing out that needs to be done. So again, here you can see I have this arc here going to this one, new arc here going to this one. If I edit this command, both of these, it's worth noting, has a normal to profile. So this center sketch, you can see this line here, hopefully you can see this arrow here, is giving it a trajectory of being tangent to itself so that when it's mirrored, there's no seam in the middle. Now this one, it's aligning along this bottom edge here. So those two are pretty straightforward. This last one's a little bit more complex, so I'm going to recreate it again from scratch. So the this is on the front plane. I'm going to create a new sketch here and convert entities on this one. And now I'm going to create a new top plane sketch and make an arc here. You know, I would also recommend keeping all these arcs consistent. So that would be like dimensioning this value all to the same amount. Just as a suggestion. But now we want to loft this to here. And of course the challenge is we also have to blend it to these two edges, and this edge disappears. So here's a new kind of trick. So under sketches, there is an option called 3D sketches. They can be a total pain in the ass, but this is how I like to use them. Is I would take a spline and click on, I'm going to hit Alt-V to just hide all the sketches. I'm going to click on this endpoint here, Alt-V to turn the sketches on, and this one, oops, I meant to select this one here. Select these 2 points in coincident. And now what I want to do is I want to select this edge and this spline and tell it to be tangent. So now we have a nice, and I would not mess with this blue arrow. It will give us the most gentle curve. It's a simple way to extend this edge to the point where we want it to go. Now the confusing thing too, if you click on sketch, it's not going to exit. I guess you could click on this here, or you can click on here in 3D sketch. Now we're going to create a new loft. So again, surfaces, go to the lofted surface, select here and select here. Whoops, wrong one. My mistake. We want to select our copied sketch and this here. And now for guide curves, we want to select this. And then this one here, we need to right click on it and say Selection Manager and select both of these since they're disjointed. And eventually what can be done then is this can be trimmed. And again, I forgot one critical point, which is to make sure that this is normal to profile. Is that right? Is that the right one? I don't know why it's looping back like this now. Yeah, I don't know. The arrow pointing to the left seems to be working better in this instance, which is weird to me. But yeah, and hopefully when that's mirrored, there's no seam. So a combination of, right, obviously we don't need all of these. I think you can always, yeah, you can just hide them or delete them. Let's see, we don't need this one either. So of course the challenge here is now like how do you terminate this? I'm going to try this. This is the simplest thing I can think of to complete this. So knit surface combines surfaces. So we can select all of these faces and we can go about halfway around. So here's our surface knit. I'm just going to select all these and just hit delete. And that puts in a delete command here. You can always suppress it and it brings them back. Now we're going to bring this back. So maybe it's better to do the threading after this surfacing, but what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to actually cut this revolve in half. And now with this solid surface, it looks like I deleted one too many. But here, let's try doing a thicken cut. This probably won't work. Oh, okay, maybe it will. We just want to make sure that this is not prescribed. This is kind of a messy hack, so to speak. This is not the best use for this tool. But again, in terms of like a simple introduction to surfaces, yeah, it doesn't like it. It didn't want to do that. All right, let's try something else. So back here in the knit, I'm going to make sure that I get more than half. So I'm going to edit this knit, and I'm going to make sure that I also grab this one, and maybe this one for good measure. And now here, this broke on us. And now bring this back. Okay, so now it looks like our surface goes all the way through everything. Not sure this is going to work, but let's try it this time with, instead of thicken cut, we're just going to cut with surface and select this. And now it's pointing out like this. And we only want to cut this one. All right, yeah, it didn't like that either. All right. So what we're going to do, we'll try this one. We're going to take this front plane and we're going to trim surface. And we're going to remove this selection here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this front plane again, and we're going to use the mirror command. Yeah, this should work. And then we're going to, I'm realizing that we need to this needs to be trimmed here, so I'm just going to create a sketch on this front plane. Draw a line here, surfaces, trim surface. It's loading the sketch we were in. Selection is to remove, and we just want to remove this top crown. Oops. We want to remove it on both the surfaces. So that means I have to select over here too. And now what we can do is we can knit these two together. So load the knit surface command. And now, let's see, the most surefire way I can think to finish this, it's a bit more complicated, but we have to use the filled surface command, and it's just it's a bit tedious, but it's a matter of going around here and selecting all of these edges. Now the back is a bit wonky, but we don't see it, so we can get away with that. You have to do the same on the bottom. Whoops, not this one, but this one. Yeah, you want to make sure you select all the edges. And now we have what, if it knitted together, can be a closed body, so now we want to select on knit and say create solid. It's a little bit more clunky, but that really is probably also just the most robust way to do that. The other ways where I was trying to just get away with something quick. So yeah, the order in which I'd build this, I'd probably start with the surfacing actually before putting in all that threading and stuff. But yeah, there you have it.